And so people rarely try those kinds of misrepresentations. But what it also enables you to do is to not just look at something from one vantage point, to get down at street level, to walk around the block, to look at it from many vantage points. So this, and that's just dealing with the physical reality. You can apply the same thinking to many other kinds of information. It has absolutely changed the nature of the conversation. And as you could tell from this clip from the counselor, the neighborhood now has access to an enormous amount of information. What he's attempting to do is to take a whole range of things that are available on GIS and put them in a form that anybody in the neighborhood, when something comes up, can actually have a look and, without doing a great deal of research, get access to that database.
There are sort of two elements that I see that you're in the middle of. On one side, there's the skill sets that some of the people in this room have to actually create the visualizations and do the work. I'm wondering who's doing that work in your estimation, kind of by category. You know, is it architects? Is it, you know, GIS professionals? And on the other hand, the folks that have the leadership to make these kinds of multi-agency projects come together. Where do you find the impetus to that to be most successful?
Well, I'll start with the last part. Some jurisdictions are really doing a tremendous job at doing this. The Paris region, Île-de-France, which is the whole area around Paris, has an incredible information base which takes you right down to the individual parcel of land. It's something like, in a more sophisticated way, what this Ward 20 in Toronto exercise has done. Metro Portland, the Portland city region, Portland, Oregon, has done something similar. So I think different jurisdictions are distinguishing themselves. As I was saying to Ron at breakfast this morning, one of the issues that's really getting in the way of all that are concerns about security, proprietary interests with respect to information sharing and so on. But nonetheless, that is coming forward. In terms of my involvement with this kind of thing, I work in partnerships with architects, landscape architects, engineers, all of the different kinds of design firms. And it's really through those firms that I keep getting access to the newest technologies. I'm not dealing generally with people like yourselves. Some of these firms are, and it's really a generational thing too. Obviously, the younger the people are in the firms, the more adept they are, the more they are conversant with the new technologies. I will say that there's almost, it feels like almost weekly, people are coming up with new ideas or new ability to do things that we couldn't do previously, and it's a pretty dynamic and exciting evolution.
So we are currently experiencing that we get a lot of more 3D city models, which are very concrete with respect to their geometry. Their extent is very concrete. But however, what you are presenting and your work that you are doing is requiring somewhat more abstract models, somewhat more. Do you see, or can you imagine also to have somewhat like digital city models which are not that concrete as than they are now?
There are really two different kinds of models, and you have to be careful not to confuse them. There are the survey-accurate models that public works departments need or survey departments need, and an enormous amount of work goes into constructing those databases. The kind of thing that I'm generally involved in as an urban designer do not require that level of accuracy, and in fact, if you try to go there, you just end up being bogged down. So we're really dealing with approximations, things which are much lighter in terms of the amount of data that they have and do not require that level of accuracy. And then as you move from this kind of conceptual work into projects, obviously there's a point where you morph into the greater level of accuracy. But I think one of the things that people are learning quickly is not to try to think that you can go right to the first type and use it for the kinds of things I'm showing.
May I just add some? Okay. It's okay. It's okay.
What new capabilities would you hope to see from Geoweb technologies that would really make a large positive impact on urban development and planning?
Well, I'm going to give you the example that I gave to Ron this morning. I'm about to start a new exercise in Minneapolis where the state and a series of municipalities from Minneapolis itself out to Eden Prairie, which is on the edge of the urban region, and 5 or 6 municipalities and counties in between are getting together, putting in a new light rail. We're going to be looking at how, much in the way that the Big Dig project arose, how to leverage the transportation investment by doing smart growth around the stations along this light rail. And I have a meeting coming up in September, and we want to do some case studies looking at the planning instruments and how they could be improved and how we could achieve these objectives. In my ideal world, if we were able to construct these cases by assembling a database that would have physical models, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional, correlated with demographic information, correlated with economic information, correlated with environmental information, so that as we're having these discussions about what to do, without having to painstakingly, on a one-off basis, assemble all that information the way we did in this Lower Don project, which takes years and costs a fortune, if all that started to be available so that we could, right from the outset, have an informed discussion about these variables and not be so much in the arena of speculation, that would be the ideal. That's really, I'm looking for an intelligent depiction of the virtual city or areas of city that correlates physical, social, and environmental and economic information in a form where you can understand it and speak to relationships.
Thomas, another question? You've talked a couple times about pervasive and ubiquitous sensors and computing starting to make its way into cities. And at the same time, you talked about the 50s and the 70s as being a sort of infrastructural invasion. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I'm just wondering if you can imagine a scenario where ubiquitous computing follows the same model and what happens?
Boy, that's a big, important question. I mean, you've raised there a whole bunch of things that we could spend an hour on. One of privacy concerns, obviously, are very much on people's minds these days, and that's a two-edged sword. I think what's really interesting for me, and again, this is a generational thing, is how the virtual world combines with the physical world that we experience to enhance it, as opposed to getting people to withdraw from society into a virtual world which replaces their physical contacts and their relationships with other people. So I'll give you 2 examples. There's something that was developed in Toronto called Murmur. I don't know if you've heard of this, where as you're walking around the city, there are various places where you'll have a phone number, and you call the phone number and you get a voice describing what happened in that place by people from that place. And it's really interesting because you just come across the most amazing discoveries. I think that's a terrific application of technology. What spooks me a little bit is when I'm in a situation with a whole lot of people who are under 20 years old, and, for example, sitting in a restaurant, and there will be 5 people sitting there, and every single one of them is on their handheld device, not talking to each other, not probably particularly enjoying the food, and certainly not seeing their surroundings. So I want the digital assist to actually make reality more potent, not get to the point where people lose interest in reality.